again, welcome to my channel and welcome to another video. Today I have some winter reading recommendations. So I'm going to start with the general fiction books I have, then I have a couple nonfiction recommendations, and I have some series that I'll mention for you. But the first book I want to recommend is City of Thieves by David Benioff. This is a short historical fiction novel, and it is set in Russia around World War II. And it has such a cold climate, such a wintry setting for this story, and it's a coming of age tale for a teenager who has to go on an interesting mission in wartime Russia. He gets himself in trouble with the police. I don't know if that's what you would call them in Russia at this time, but they catch him with like a knife or something that he got off a body. I don't know, but his crime is punishable by death. But he has a chance to redeem himself by going on a mission to find a dozen eggs, and he goes on this mission with a soldier, a deserter that he meets in prison, and you just follow their friendship as it develops, and you follow these two young men as they learn about themselves and learn about the world. This is definitely an adult novel. Just the themes of war, and there's some violence in this, but I enjoyed this so much. It's heartwarming and sad, and it's just a really great story. I really enjoyed it. Would recommend. I gave this 5 stars when I read it, and I am really wanting to pick it up again now that it is December and getting cold out. This next book is The Afterlife of Holly Chase by Cynthia Hand. This book gets recommended a lot around Christmas time, but do you know what? It's a Christmas novel, and this is a young adult retelling of the Christmas Carol, and we follow our main character, Holly Chase, and she is the Scrooge. And the setup for this novel is that there is a business, a company, and it is their job to find a Scrooge every year and pull off the Christmas story with them. So Holly is a Scrooge at the beginning, and then she gets roped into this supernatural company to find other Scrooges and help give them the spirit of Christmas. This is really good. It's got a little bit of romance in it, and it's really funny. But this is the time of the year to read this book. I would recommend it if you want a Christmassy holiday read. And that was really the only holiday themed book I have for you. The next book I want to recommend is Lightning by Dean Koontz. This is a suspense thriller science fiction novel, and we follow our main character. Her name's Laura. I think it's been a while since I read this book. I remember loving it so much. And on the night of Laura's birth, I just want to make sure that her name is Laura before yes, okay. On the night of Laura's birth, there's a storm, and I think someone tries to kill her, and this stranger comes and helps save her. And then this stranger is a constant theme throughout her honestly pretty tragic and violent life. So we learn more about him, and Laura is a really awesome character too. And there's a pretty heavy science fiction theme as you go throughout this book, but it's just like a dark suspense. And I just know that at the end of the book, I believe they are in a very wintry setting. So perfect winter suspense thriller read for you. Another science fiction thriller I have is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This is a suspense novel with a setting of the multiverse, which is a physical theory that for our universe to exist, there also must be other universes that contain us, but we have made slightly different choices. So we could be only slightly altered in these other realities, or we could be completely different people based on the choices that we've made. And this book follows our main character, Jason. He's a community college level physics teacher, and he gets kidnapped one day and sent to this different world where he is like this very renowned technological inventor. He's very rich, but he doesn't have his family. And you follow him as he goes on this journey throughout the different universes to try to get back to his family. You find out a lot more during that, but there's one universe that he goes to that's very cold and snowy. So that's why I'm recommending it, other than it's just a good book in general. Okay, I have 2 nonfiction books I want to recommend. One of them is The Year of Living Danishly by Helen Russell. And this is written by Helen Russell, who is a British journalist, and she moves to Denmark with her husband, who is in the Lego company. And she writes for a year just about her experience living in a Scandinavian country. So Denmark is very cold. It is one of those countries where in the wintertime it's like dark for most of the day. Denmark gets very cold, and there's a term in Denmark called hygge. I'm not sure how it's spelled, but I'll put it right here. And it is just a word that describes hunkering down at your house and being cozy. And she goes into how the Danes like set up their houses and how they make them cozy, but also they have that like Scandinavian style, you know what I'm talking about? And it also talks about their, I don't want to say their political system, their government, because they have a very heavy tax. They have very high taxes. And it gets into why are Danes so much happier than the rest of the world. I think it gets into a lot of statistics about happiness and what part of Danish society makes their people happier. I listened to the audio book of it and it was really good. And then the next nonfiction title I want to recommend is The Stranger in the Woods by Michael Finkel. It's not a survival story. It's more of a biography about a man who lived for 27 years in the woods in Maine alone, by himself. Did not talk to anyone else for almost 30 years. Until one day he has to be apprehended by the authorities because he's been stealing supplies to sustain himself. And this journalist just interviews him and develops a kind of relationship with him as he's in prison for these like thousands of burglaries that he committed. But I feel like this book just has a really interesting commentary on society and how we're expected to live a certain way, even though that certain way may not be what's best for everyone. And it's really hard to kind of forge your own path if it is very different from what is expected of you. But this is really good. Obviously, Maine can get very, very cold. And we do get to hear about the survival of this man in the woods when it was wintertime in the wilderness. And I loved this. It was really good. Another book I listened on audio. Okay, and I just wanted to mention a few fantasy series because I feel like it's winter time. A lot of people are just looking to read some very engrossing, enveloping books, and I'm just picking some fantasy series to recommend. The first one I'll mention is The Stormlight Archives by Brandon Sanderson. I'll link my video below where I talk about this and 2 of the other series I'm going to mention. But this is an adult epic fantasy. The 4th book in the series just came out, so it's not a completed series. But in this series, we are in a world that has a continuous cycle of desolations where society basically ends. There are wars that just destroy all the learning, all the technology, all the people from these different eras. And we think we've gotten past those, but then another one starts happening. We follow several different points of view, and there's a magic system based around stormlight, which is generated from these storms that happen periodically in this world. And typically the stormlight is just used for technology and different inventions. But then as we head into one of these desolations, the humans of the world start to be able to use stormlight. Really good, excellent series. Like I said, I will link my video discussing it more below. Another Brandon Sanderson series that I will mention is his Mistborn trilogy. This is completed, and there's a spin-off trilogy which is also completed. Haven't read it, heard it's really good, obviously. But this is it's like a fantasy dystopian, and we have a world where the nobility and their slave class, they're called the Ska in this world, are very separated and have been for the last 1,000 years. They've also had the same ruler for the last 1,000 years. He hasn't died, he hasn't really aged, and in this series, the magic system is set around metals, and different people can ingest certain metals, and they have different powers based on those metals. Not everyone can manipulate metals, and if you can, you typically only have the ability to control one metal unless you are Mistborn. Then you can control all the metals. And this is another, I don't really know if I would say it's different perspectives, but we just follow several characters. But our main character is Vin. She is a teenager when the series starts, and she's your typical street urchin, you know, orphan, never had a family, and she finds out how to harness her powers and help make the world better. I say all the time, each book in this series I thought was wrapping up, and I was like, how are there more books? But then Brandon Sanderson just comes in with the plot twist, and we just learn even more about this world. Another great fantasy series. I'll also recommend Patrick Rothfuss's Kingkiller Chronicles. There are 2 out in this series, The Name of the Wind and The Wise Man's Fear is the second book. This is a fantasy where we follow our main character Kvothe as he tells his story to this chronicler who is recording his history. We follow his very tragic upbringing, and as he harnesses his powers, the magic system in this series is called sympathy, and anyone can do it. You just have to really study and practice, and it's a very academic magic. And we follow Kvothe as he harnesses his powers and explores the world and just goes on different adventures. And it's kind of a split timeline between the story that Kvothe is telling and the present day, where we have some interesting things coming about. And you also realize that Kvothe has lost all of his acclaim, basically, that he had earned for himself, because now he cannot use his powers. And I don't really know where it is going to go. Like I said, it's not completed, but if you are looking to just dive into a great fantasy, I would recommend the Kingkiller Chronicles. I also have a young adult, kind of new adult-ish fantasy to recommend, and it is Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. This is a recently completed series. It was completed last November, I think, and there are 7 books and a book of short stories. I could count. Yeah, 7 books and a book of short stories. But like I said, this definitely starts out more young adult, but into your later books in the series, it gets a little more new adult. And we follow Selena Sardothian, who is an assassin. She is 17 when the story starts, and Throne of Glass, she is just getting out of the salt mines where she has been a slave for the past year, and now she has to compete to become the king's champion. So she's competing against all these other kind of criminals, other assassins. That is just the basis of this story. It goes on to much bigger and better things, but this world has lost its magic. Something happened like 10 years ago, and all the magic users in this world can no longer use their magic. This book has Fae in it, and Fae are kind of like different beings who have these abilities. There's different kinds of magic. There's also shape-shifting and just your general like magic casting. There's spells, there's healing, all kinds of different magic. All kinds of different characters, different continents, different countries, different races of people. There are witches, there are wyverns, which are like dragons. There's just a lot going on in this huge series. It is so good. There's romance in it, which I really, really enjoy. And I would totally recommend getting started on it this winter. I'll just mention a couple other series. I think Harry Potter is a good series to get started in the winter. Percy Jackson is another good series. Just all of these, you know, your traditional fantasy fiction series that you can just get lost in this winter. But thank you all for watching. Let me know in a comment below some of your winter recommendations. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next one.